What do you think makes a meaningful career?
What is the difference? Why you prefer coaching over mentoring? How do we distinguish ourselves from the pack? If you're not at the table, you're on the menu.
And oftentimes our hands have to get dirty. What could be the best outcome for this situation? I'm Michael.
I'm Regine.
And this is Gears in Motion.
Continuing with our conversation from last time, right? And so I wonder now, after having said that and having told you what my question would have been, what do you have as an answer for my generation and also for the most experienced and also for those who come? And how can we help, continue to help, the generation that's coming up so that they can thrive and succeed?
Yeah, I think that's a great point that you bring up, because for you to be able to support other people, you need to make sure that you're doing well and that you also have support. One of the things that we talk about a lot in training is that as us being psychiatrists, we have to be practicing self-care ourselves. We need to have a therapist ourselves. We need to make sure that we're okay, so that when we're dealing with a lot of, the difficult situations and patients that we have, we can adequately support them because we're also not drowning on our own as well. I think that it's hard because therapy is great, but it's not necessarily accessible to everyone. Not everyone is going to have either the money or the finances to, be able to see a therapist. Not everyone is going to be able to get to a psychiatrist and get the medication that they need, unfortunately. But that's a reason why I think a lot of now mental health workers are looking at this whole idea of doing more group-based therapy, where you go into communities that have a group of people that have some kind of tying thing that, brings them together as a community. It could be language. It could be something that they have in common culture-wise. It could be, a single moms group, but they have a forum, they have a place for them to discuss, just life, just ordinary things that are happening. And when things begin to get too much, or, there's someone in the group that can identify, this is getting a little more serious. I think we need to get a professional on board. Then that person can then get funneled to, the limited resources. Unfortunately, it's limited, but the limited resources for mental health support. So I think because you originally asked about people who are kind of, older, how do they get the support that they need? For people that are kind of looking at therapy and weary of it, I always like the idea of being in groups first, because it's not intimidating. It doesn't feel like, oh, I'm alone with the doctor, something's wrong with me. It's a safe space where you can all talk and discuss things. And as you start talking and as you start discussing, for that person, they might realize, oh, maybe this is terrible. That was a traumatic thing I went through and I haven't dealt with that. And I've been taking it out on my kids. I've been taking it out on my spouse. Maybe I need more help. So that can be the gateway to kind of awakening someone to realizing that they need more support than they initially thought.
Speaking of sleep, right? You had a wake-up call in a Black History class.
Yeah.
So talk with us about that. And how do you think discoveries like this can and should drive research, in areas that are parallel to yours?
Yeah. So I took a physician's Black history class it was during my last year of medical school, like towards the end of my training. And that class was eye-opening for me because it was when I learned in detail about the history of eugenics in the United States. And in particularly the school that I was at, UVA, has a history, unfortunately, that is very closely tied with the eugenics movement. A lot of the deans of the medical school and a lot of different professors whose buildings are, still named after them were really involved in pioneering a movement that essentially was advocating for race science, saying that people that were Black were biologically inferior to white. And it didn't only extend to Black peoples, anyone that was, handicapped, any kind of minority group or any group that was at a disadvantage for various reasons. And that was a wake-up call to me because I realized that something was wrong with the education that I had received up until this point, and that I had not heard about this. And so I took this class that I decided to sign up for, and not because it was a mandatory class for everyone. So in response to that, I really became an advocate for reforming the medical education that medical students receive at the university that I was at. And so this led to me working on a project where I basically started doing research. I talked to some of the librarians and some of the historians that literally have the primary documents and textbooks that outline the previous curriculum that was upholding all of these racist ideas, and just putting them on a website that people can easily access and learn about the information for themselves. So I started talking to people in the curriculum committee, and now that website and curriculum is part of work that incoming medical students will see once they start, medical education. And I mean, this is something that I'm so passionate about now. Even at the new institution that I'm at now, I'm already talking to the Black Medical Students Association, and I'm like, all right, what are you guys learning? What's in the curriculum? I've already started to give a lecture, just to highlight some of the things that are not covered in the curriculum that they're getting. And I'm trying to work and see what are the gaps that need to be filled in. Because I think if you don't educate people on basically the terrible effects that can happen when racism infiltrates scientific research, which the results are that we have things like the Tuskegee experiment, we have people that are getting mistreated. All of these things have an impact for our future. And it goes back to STEM, because a lot of the technological advances, HeLa cells that we use to do research, understanding how cancer spreads, all of that stems from the mistreatment of Black people, right? So all of that knowledge and all of that education, it needs to start early, and it needs to happen now so that we can change the way that we're conducting experiments, the way that we're designing research questions, how we even ask questions can be marginalizing. So yeah, I care about it a lot, and it was a huge wake-up call. And I think it made me realize just kind of the bigger mindset for me to have for my career, just kind of thinking about the long term, that I care a lot about medical education. And also that I care about the impact of the future research that I have. What questions am I asking? Am I asking the right questions? Am I representing people that don't have a voice?
Yeah, that's key. Being observant to be able to recognize what's in and what's not in their curriculum, being sensitive to be able to provide recommendations on how to structure and change some of what you're experiencing for a future generation. And I think being able to rely on strength to be able to bring that to the forefront. I'm sure these are uncomfortable, or not, I know these are uncomfortable topics. And I think so much, so many times, we've got our head in the books. We've got our head like, I've got to get through this. I understand what the coursework is. I've got to make it to the end of this, but being able to make a difference as you go is a gift as well. And I'm encouraged to hear you talk about that, and then to go from one community, right, UVA, to another community up north, and be able to want to make that same conversation a priority. Transitioning a little more lightheartedly, the audience doesn't know this, or they don't know this yet, but I do. You've got a sense of humor and appreciation for the arts. And I think, I've seen your Twitter, I've seen some of your social handles around just humor itself. And through challenges and difficulties, people in our community have really relied on humor. They've relied on a number of different, what I'd qualify as maybe cope, for lack of better words, coping mechanisms to help get them through and to push them through hard times, through challenges. I mean, we even see that in music. For the longest time, our ancestors survived through song. So tell us, what do humor and the arts do for you?
Oh man, they keep me going. I think for me, the arts and particularly music is just something that I'm just passionate about. It's something that I do to de-stress, to, not think about all of the craziness that's going on every day. It's just a good release for me. And that can take various forms. It can be me being involved in performance, or it can be going to concerts. I think that also humor, like you said, it's something that our community, we do well. Like, we can be suffering, just going through a terrible time, but I'll know that, if I go on Black Twitter, I'll be laughing my head off, even though it's like something terrible is going on. Humor just keeps me going. And I think, we talked earlier about the signs that like things are not going well. Even with patients, I always try to crack a few jokes, because if they, are not laughing, or if they don't understand the humor, that tells me that they're not doing well. They're not in a good place. Humor is actually something that's complicated and takes, a lot of parts of the brain for you to comprehend and understand. And if you're still laughing, then you can keep going. So always finding ways to laugh and just enjoy life is how I keep myself motivated.
Oh, that's awesome. And you sing as well. The audience may or may not know that, but I know you sing as well. And I'm sure that also helps you to push forward as well. Yeah. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, that's good. I'm glad you mentioned Black Twitter, because that's exactly what I was thinking. I think sometimes people don't think about it, but it's true. Bible says laughter is a medicine for the heart. And I think sometimes I definitely use that as my TikTok excuse to go and veg out on some things. So Nadine, it's clear, it's evident, I think, that you are mentally tough and resilient. And I think that's definitely a testament to how you were raised. I'm sure a lot of your experiences have helped build some of that grit and sturdiness. And many other folks have experiences that they are trying to make meaning out of, and of course, build that same sort of mental stability and strength. Tell us, how can we build that? Obviously, every person is unique, every person is different, but how would you recommend building your mental stamina?
Yeah, I think one of the things that's served me well is that I tend to take time to reflect. Whenever, life is happening and there's a lot of stuff going on, even if I'm on public transportation and it's just a couple of minutes for me to think, okay, how am I doing right now? What's going on? How did I handle this situation? How did I handle that situation? And not in a way for me to, beat myself up or feel terrible about it, but in a way for me to figure out what can I learn from, the way that this went well or the way that this completely failed. It's definitely true that, people who are successful fail frequently, but they learn from their failures. And I think that is a good mindset to have in your life as well, because there's always going to be obstacles. There's always going to be things that are difficult, but figuring out a way to get through the challenges, I think, means that you're reflecting on what happens. You're not just kind of going through it and, not gleaning any meaning from it. And sometimes you can't make meaning out of things that happen. But I think you can always take the time to pause and kind of ask yourself, how did I handle this? Or how could I have done this differently? And sometimes if you're not sure, you can discuss it with different people. I think sometimes it's easy, even when you have friends, to just spend your time, talking about surface level things and not really getting into the weeds of what's going on. but I think intentionally having conversations with people where you say, hey, I think I'm not doing so well in this area, or this is like particularly hard. Like, how are you getting through, this particular part of your life, because there's a lot of things that we just all go through as human beings. So a lot of times other people have ways that they've dealt with things, or sometimes you talk to them and you both realize neither of us have handled this well. We need to talk to someone else.
Yep.
So, I think reflecting is something, is a technique that I've used a lot. And I became more aware of it actually when I saw a therapist and they said, you're a reflective person. Like, you think a lot about what's happened and you learn from it, and you that's kept you very resilient. So yeah, I would say reflecting.
That's a good lesson for all of us. That is excellent. So I know we've talked about what you're doing now and your background and your journey. So, but I'd like to know a little bit, what are your plans for your future? Because, after hearing you, we just have we have very high expectations of the future, of what the future holds for Dr. Michelle. So please tell us. Yes.
Yeah. So I'm, interested in, continuing ahead with the career as a physician scientist. So what that would look like for me is that I would have some time, working as a psychiatrist where I see patients. I'm particularly interested in community psychiatry because I'm interested in working with people from, lower socioeconomic backgrounds, also interested in working with immigrants, with refugees, doing asylum evaluations for people that are, trying to get into the U.S. So that, I think, clinically are where my interests lie right now. But then in terms of the research, I'm really interested in doing biomedical research that includes individuals that historically have not been involved in biological research, or if they have been involved, it hasn't been with their consent, frankly. So my background is, doing early brain development and looking at cell development. So I would be interested in working with samples that are from Black and Brown folks, that are from communities that typically are not represented in scientific research. And I really want to impact the way that we talk to minority populations about research, because there's a lot of fear about getting involved in research for reasons we talked about with, like the Tuskegee experiment, all of these different things. But at the same time, not being involved in research means that your problems, your interests, your, real diseases and disorders are not being researched. The solutions are not coming because your group is getting left behind. So how do we bring everyone to the table so that they're being represented, and the questions that we're asking and the experiments that we're doing are actually addressing things that represent people that have not had a seat at the table? So I see myself in the future doing research that is really forging the path ahead and asking the difficult questions about how, social injustice, how environmental changes due to poverty and impact brain development. How do they impact the way that someone's brain functions? How do they impact the risk someone has for developing a psychiatric disorder? We know that there are so many terrible things that happen when people are, go through traumatic experiences. For instance, even looking at immigrants just to get to this country is extremely difficult. People go through unimaginable, terrible events to get here that are extremely stressful, that are extremely traumatizing. What does that do for them? What does that mean for their bodies? What does that mean for the next generation that happens after them? I'm interested in looking into those things. Yeah.
We love it. I love the passion, and also the fact that it would be groundbreaking, right?
Yeah.
So do you often or sometimes think of legacy, and what does that word mean to you?
Yeah, I think of legacy because even in my training and even in my career, I'm carrying on the legacy of other people that have trained me. And going forward, I want my legacy to be what those people have instilled in me, how I've kind of, shaped it for myself and leaving that behind for the next generation. So I think some of the biggest influences on my life have been people that I've met who are scientists, who are researchers, but they genuinely care about human beings. They care about the development of others. They care about making the world a better place. I think there can be this mentality that scientists are just kind of in the lab and they're, pipetting and they're making all these chemicals and things, and they don't care about what's happening with other people. But that's not true. You can care about those questions and those experiments because you care about other people, because you care about making the world a better place. And that also means that the environment that you create as you build a lab and you bring other people into your research, into the work that you do, that can also be a healthy environment. So I want my legacy to be as a researcher that is humane, that cares about the wellness of all human beings, because everyone is created in God's image. And so I want my legacy to be that value instilled in multiple people, so that the people that work with me, that train with me, they get a sense of that vision and they carry it to the different places that they go.
Dr. Michelle, that was amazing. That was excellent. Thank you again for your time. This is Regine.
This is Michael.
Until next time.